Everyone, and welcome to this presentation on thesis writing in times of uncertainty. The purpose of this presentation is to provide thesis writers with some strategies to begin writing during these difficult times and to keep writing. You may find that although you've scheduled writing time, that when you come to sit down at your computer, something else distracts you and you're always off doing whatever it is that has pulled your attention. So this presentation is really to deliver some strategies to help you to stay writing when you've scheduled writing time. One of the things I want to explain first is how we write from two different places. And the best way I can explain this is to call them the editor and the writer. Now, when we first learned to write, we wrote mostly from the writer's state. And this is a free, creative, innovative space. But as we go through school and as we write more and more, we shift into this editor mode. And the editor mode really is about looking at our writing in terms of error and correction. So then we begin to focus on the errors and the corrections, and we lose sight of the message and the creativity and the innovation. And we feel that we have to work really hard to be creative and innovative. And this editor's state gets more advanced or more dominant the more we write. So if you're doing an advanced degree like a PhD, the chances are you'll have a really well developed internal editor. And that editor is always checking to see whether you're doing it right. Now, this editor, this internal voice constantly corrects our writing and criticizes us. And it's very hard to write with fluency if you are writing from this editor's mode. So that editor is really useful. It's a protective voice. It grows because it wants to protect us. So that's the voice that's telling you, don't write this because the last time you wrote this, you got red ink all over your paper. Or the last time you wrote this, you felt terrible afterwards. So that editor is really there to protect you. But the problem is, especially for writing, is that it stops you from writing. You will begin a sentence saying, 10 years ago, and then your editor will say, no, you can't say that, that's too vague. And then you might change it to over the past 2 decades, and then the editor will say, no, that's even worse. So you end up not writing because the editor's constantly criticizing and correcting you. So when we want to generate writing, we want to write from this writer's state. And then later on, once we've generated writing, the editor can come back in and fix it up for us. That's when the editor is really useful. Now, when we're worried, anxious, or stressed, we automatically switch to this editor mode because it's trying to protect us. So, for example, now, if you're concerned about the future, what's going to happen with your program, what's happening at the university, how is this all going to work out, then it's very hard to write when you're in that anxious state. So we want to really try and switch to the writer's state and then bring the editor in later on when we want to worry about things. So the editor is focused on time, it's very time conscious, it's focused on getting things right, on being perfect, which we all know is impossible, and avoiding future criticism. That's a key component of this editor state, is to prevent you from being criticized on your writing in the future. So it wants to prevent failure. So what we really would like to do is shift away from the editor, but very kindly because that editor is there to help us, into this writer's state where we can be much more relaxed, we can make associations much more freely, we can engage with imagination, even in terms of our science projects or our very rational projects. We still need imagination to make those leaps of, and those connections that really give us innovative research. But we can only do that from this relaxed state where we engage in creativity and enjoyment. And what the writer state does is it allows us to generate writing, to get something on the page that we can later fix up and bring the editor back in to help us to do that. Now, not everything we generate when we are in the writer state will be useful, but it's much easier to fix and edit a draft than it is to create the draft. So just by generating writing, you are moving the process forward. So how do we switch from the editor to the writer mode when we want to write? And how do we do this in times of stress when we're worried about so many things, as everybody is at the moment? Well, the very first thing, and I'm going to present a couple of strategies here, but the first thing I would suggest is timed writing. Set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes and write. And this is called free writing. And with free writing, what you want to do is not go back and correct. So you're going to write and let your grammar be atrocious, let your language be awful. You know, if you write in multiple languages, drop words in from all your different languages. You might find that it looks like gibberish. It doesn't matter, because the point is to get something down that you can fix up later and to get out of that editor's state where you're constantly correcting. Now, timed writing is really useful, and in the beginning you might only be able to write for maybe 2 minutes, but eventually you want to build up to about 25 minutes. 25 minutes is enough time for you to work on a sustained piece of writing, to get focused, to get something done, and then you take a 5 to 10 minute break where you actually move around. You get up and you walk, you go outside, you make yourself a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is that you drink, and you might still be thinking about the writing, but you're not sitting there physically writing. And that, if you do the 25-10, you'll find that you are able to write for longer and in a much more focused way and get a lot of writing done. So when you're generating writing and with timed writing, what we're trying to do is to focus on the message, get your thoughts down, and then fix it up later. So you can do preparation for timed writing. So you could say, well, I want to write this section in my methodology my methodology chapter. And you can do lots of preparation for that. Then set the preparation aside, set the timer, and just free write. And you'll see that you'll have a lot of your preparation that will come through in the timed writing. Then you can fix it up, go back, insert references, add in quotes, or, really fix it up once you've got the first draft down. Another strategy to help you shift from the editor to the writer mode is to begin with a prompt. Now, you can find these prompts anywhere, and I'll give you examples here now. A good example, is to write about your research as if it were a door or a doorway. So in what way does your research open doors or close doors? Or in what way are doors closed that need to be opened? You don't have to think about it systematically. Just go with the flow. It could just be nonsense in the end. It doesn't really matter, because what it's doing is shifting you from the editor into this writer's state. You might find that you can use some of that later. You might find you're making connections that you hadn't anticipated, and that would be wonderful. But if not, it's just this bridge into more sustained writing. You can use other metaphors like rivers, doors, roads, or pathways, anything really that is not logical in a sense, and that allows you to make this associative shift. Another example would be to randomly choose an animal. It's very helpful if you have a picture. So go on the internet, choose a picture, and then relate the characteristics of the animal to your research. Now, you're not doing this in a logical, systematic way. You really, what you're saying is things like, well, my research has mobility like the sea turtle. My research crosses boundaries like the sea turtle. Things like that. So you're being loose about your research instead of trying to do everything right. You're opening it up and you're saying, well, this may sound like nonsense, but let's see where it goes. You could also choose a random image off the internet or from a magazine, open, a book on a page and have a look at a picture and see how would my research look like this? How would my research, how can I describe my research in relation to these stairs, for example? Another really good activity, which I've used often over the years, and many of my students have found it so helpful, is to write about your research as if it were a tree. What would be the roots, the trunk, the branches, the flowers? You might even talk about who would live in the tree. Um, yeah, so just be loose about it. Once you finish the warm up activity, then you can move into your regular, sustained writing work. Another strategy would be to write to your grandmother. Now, I didn't have grandmothers growing up, so I have an idealized version of this very kindly but honest person who won't want any academic nonsense, right? So this person would say, you know what, Lovey, what you're saying is wonderful, but I don't understand what you mean. So you have to write where you focus on the message and you're only dealing with the specifics and not the academic jargon or the academic speak. It's a very useful way to get at the nitty gritty of what you're trying to do. So you might say to your grandmother or whoever else you're using, in this chapter, what I really want to focus on is, and then you write about that. You could also free write, and this is another activity that's been very helpful for my students. The story I'm trying to tell in this thesis, this section or this chapter is, and then focus on the story that you're trying to get across here. Now, these are just quick, really brief activities that will take you into much more sustained writing. Another strategy that I tell my students to use all the time is to sketch or draw. Now, you don't have to be an artist. We're talking about, symbols and stick figures, and you don't have to show anybody any of these activities. They're for your eyes only. But sketching or drawing is really useful because it provides you with a holistic view of your research, and you can see multiple components and you can draw connections between different things. When you work with writing, there's a very linear kind of process that you follow, and it's often difficult to see that whole picture, and drawing can do that for you. So this is an activity that I give my students all the time. They found it very helpful. Sketch your research as if it were on a stage. Who is center stage, or what is center stage? Who or what is the main actor? Who's in the wings, the background? Who's the audience? And so on. You can do a free write, and then do the drawing, and then do a free write, and then take your free writes and edit out. Keep what you need, or if you need to, throw the whole lot out, because that's not the point. The point is to get you into generating writing. Another activity would be to take your research as if it were a map. And this is really when you want to focus on taking the reader through your writing. I often give this to students to do when they are writing their literature reviews. So, for example, you might have 3 bodies of literature that you're trying to navigate. And if you draw a map with the bodies of literature as, different hills or different components on the map, then show how you would take your reader through in a connected way so that they could see the connections between those 3 bodies of literature. So drawing a map where the ultimate goal is either a key message or your research results can be a really useful pre-writing activity, and can help you get going on the writing itself. Another really good strategy is mind maps or organic maps, and this is where you brainstorm onto a piece of paper when you're just writing words rather than sentences. And if you use color, it often helps quite substantially. So, for example, if you were developing a section, you might brainstorm, what is my argument in this section? What evidence am I providing for my claims? If you were working on your methodology section, you might say, what needs to go into this methodology section to convince my reader that this approach was appropriate and really the only one for this research. So you're just jotting down words randomly all over a piece of paper, And then you can free write, and then from there you can develop much more sustained writing. A strategy that I always recommend is to go back to the problem purpose statement, particularly if you've been away from your research for a while. Go back, rewrite the problem purpose statement, because the problem purpose statement is all about the conceptualization of the research. And sometimes the research shifts as we work on it, and there's a slight misalignment, and that often can cause a block. And I would really focus on whether the questions are unpacking the research problem. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I have lots of videos on the problem purpose statement. It's a one-page conceptualization document. I would definitely recommend that you do this and you go and look at those videos. I find that often opens the door to writing. So just to sum up, all of these writings are pre-writing activities that help you switch from this very critical editor's mode into a much more relaxed state where you can write more freely. These activities are, warm-up activities or writing activities where you are generating first draft writing. Using a timer can be really helpful. Once you've got some writing down, then you can take that writing, you can throw it away, or you can edit it and keep what you think is useful. But you'll find that they work as a bridge into much more sustained and focused writing. The whole point is to enjoy the prompts, not to think too deeply about it, just to go with the flow, not to worry about what you're saying because nobody needs to read it. But of course, if you do have a writing buddy, it would be really useful to swap these with a writing buddy. But they're activities to take you into this writer mode where you can write or you can generate writing without constantly criticizing yourself. Just a quick note on other resources. If you haven't already seen my videos, I have quite a few videos on multiple aspects of writing a thesis and writing for publication. So go and have a look, search my name. Another site, a YouTube channel that I think is really useful, particularly from shifting from that editor to writer mode, is Helen Sword's channel. She has activities on using words and playing with words and on using metaphors to jumpstart your writing. So have a look at that. Otherwise, best of luck in getting going with your writing, and I hope these activities help you to keep focused. Thanks for watching. Bye.